everyone, welcome to the last part of JavaScript. Till now, we have talked about what is DOM events, what are DOM manipulation, and we have seen how we can add promises, how we can add functions like async and await in our JavaScript. Now, in this session, what we are gonna do is that we are gonna talk about APIs. We will see what is a API, how we can use API, and why we use API. So before we talk about in detail uh, about APIs, I want to talk a simple concept which we have studied before. And if you remember, the concept which I'm talking right now is request response cycle, and we have discussed the same topic in the beginning of our course. In lecture 0, I have talked about a concept called as request response cycle, and it is really important to understand the concept of request response cycle, how request response cycle will work in order to understand the behavior and the usage of an API. So let us begin with our first concept, which is request response cycle, and this is very simple. For example, let's say that in a browser I'm searching something. Let's say, for example, I'm searching amazon.in. So whenever I search amazon.in, a request will get sent by our browser to that particular server. In this case, I'm searching amazon.in. That is why our request will go to Amazon server, and based on our request, here you can see our request is we want Amazon website, and what this Amazon server will do is that based on the request, it will return a bundle of HTML, CSS and JavaScript bundle, or you can say documents together. And what our browser will do is that it will compile, it will add all these documents, and it will present it in a neat format, right? In a very clear and neat format, we'll get our website. So here what we did, first of all, we send a request to that particular corresponding server, and that server, based on whatever the request we have, it has given me a bundle of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and our browser rearranged all these documents and showed me the front end part of our website. So this cycle, we call it as a request response cycle, and here API is very similar to this request response cycle, but in the place of server, what we will have is we will have APIs. The full form of API is application programming interface. We will talk about this what is API, why we use it in detail, but all you need to understand here is if I replace our server with an API, and that API, what the work of that API is, it will return some data whenever I call it. Right here, what our Amazon server did, it has returned me the bundle of HTML, CSS and JavaScript. But in the place of server, if I replace our server with an API, then what this API will do is that it will return some data, and that data is in JSON format. Okay, a little bit hard, a little bit confusing, because we are talking about some different terminologies, right? We have talked about API, which we don't know. I'm like talking about a new term called as JSON, which we don't know. But give me few minutes, give me 2 minutes, I will clear it out everything. Okay, so the thing you need to remember here is, in this request response cycle, we are having servers. And this server is returning me HTML, CSS and JavaScript document. Now imagine a scenario where we are not having servers, right? We are having, in the place of servers, we are having, you can say, something called as API, and that API, based on the request, it is giving me some data. So this thing is known as the working of an API, or you can say request response cycle of an API. Okay, so the thing you need to remember is very simple. We will send that same request, but in the place of servers, we will have APIs, and whenever we send request, we'll have some response, right? When we call some request to our servers, what it is returning? It is returning me the HTML, CSS and JavaScript document, but APIs will return some new data. That's all. This is the only difference between normal request response cycle and API request response cycle. Okay, understood? But Jabir, tell me, you are like telling APIs 1,000 times, but what is the meaning of API and how we can understand the concept of API? So to understand what is API and how we can understand the concept of API, let me take a simple example. Okay, let's say you are a customer, and you're going to a restaurant. You are a customer and you are in a restaurant. Okay, here I'm writing some spelling mistakes, forgive me, but yeah, here you are a customer and you are in a restaurant. Now what you will do, you won't directly, let's say you want to order some food, but you won't directly go into the kitchen and you won't directly tell to the chef, okay chef, I want this. You don't do that. So what you will do here is that you will tell waiter, you will tell waiter, and what this waiter will do is that he will go into kitchen, and based on your request, this is a request, and based on your request he will give you some output, like some kitchen people, chef will give some food, and here your waiter will give response to you. So this middleman, you can consider it as a API is nothing but a mediator, or you can say middleman. So instead of here, whenever I search amazon.in, instead of directly going to the server, what we will do is that we will call the APIs of Amazon. We won't directly go to the servers, we'll go to the APIs of that particular server, of that particular database. And what API will do is that API will go to that particular database, and based on your request it will get some data, and whatever the data they get, they will give you that data, and mostly that data is in the form of JSON. Okay, so JSON is very similar to JavaScript object. We will talk about JSON in few minutes, but I hope you have understood what is the meaning of API. Okay, what is the meaning of a API? API is a middleman. Whenever you want something in a restaurant, you want something, you wanna order some food, so what you will do is that you will call the waiter and you will tell the waiter, waiter, I want this, I want this cuisine, I want this dishes, all these things, and waiter will go in the kitchen, he will take whatever the food you have ordered and he will give it to you. So this is the work of an API. This is how a API will work. Okay, understood. And one more thing is that APIs are nothing but URLs, right? API is nothing but a URL, and whenever you call this URL, it will go in the endpoint, and that endpoint is a server, right? It will go in the server, or you can say database, whatever it is. It will go into that endpoint, it will fetch some data, and it will get some data, and it will return it to the client, or you can say to the user. Okay, and there are mainly two types of APIs. There are two types of APIs, and the most important thing you need to understand here is APIs are used, or you can say APIs are built to create a communication system between softwares. Let's say that I am having a software 1 and software 2. Now to create a communication interface between these two softwares, what we have done is we have created a mediator, and that mediator is API, right? That mediator is API. Okay, whenever we create a communication system between two operating systems or two softwares, then we call this API as a general API. But whenever we deal with a internet based API, with a HTTP based API, then we call that particular type of API as web API. And in web development, we are gonna focus, we will always focus on web APIs. Okay, so let us see an example. I want to show you an example. So how a API will work. I will search about let's say Twitter API. So here Twitter has its own API. Every like platform, every huge tech company has their own API, and you can see in Twitter we are having different APIs, like different like API access level versions, try live request, all this sort of things. And here you can go into the documentation. Go here and you can see users tweets lookup, all these things. You can read the document, and what this API will do is that it will give you, you can go into the field and you can study about in detail what this API will do. So here Twitter has its own API, and I think Meta also has its API. So API, and this is the Meta's API. And you can see we have Facebook games APIs, graphs API, Instagram API, and all this sort of Instagram platform API. And what this API will do is that, for example, let's say I'm a huge celebrity and people are tagging me, but I don't have enough time to react to this people, right? To react to this many people. So what I can do is that I can create an API. And what this API will do is that it will automatically whenever some person mention me in their like post, or whenever someone comment on my post, I wanna immediately reply to that. So instead of going in the platform and logging in after replying to that person, what I can do is that I can create a API, and this API will automatically create a system in which we can build the auto like system. For example, if someone is mentioning me, then automatically that post will get liked. Like this, using APIs we can automate our social platforms. But this APIs, Twitter API, I think Meta API, and also Google APIs, we have Google Maps API as well. Let me show you. Google Maps API, Google Maps API. And Google Maps API also, you can track, okay, what is your location, how you can integrate this API in your platform. For example, if you are creating a Uber platform, if you are building some platform like Uber, right? So in that case, what you can do, you can use the API of Google Maps, okay, and using Google Maps you can track where is your vehicle, where is your rider, where is your cab driver. All these things you can do using APIs. You can automate the process. Instead of building your everything from scratch, you can use the pre-built APIs of Google, Meta, Facebook, all these things. Okay, but we have mainly two types of APIs. Let me come here and let me remove all this. Okay, we have mainly, I hope you have understood what is API, how API will work. Okay, so based on our functionalities, we have two types of APIs. The first type is general APIs. General APIs, or you can say normal APIs, and you can use this APIs anytime. These are free to use, and there is no need to pay anything like that. And I will show you some APIs. We will use some APIs in this lecture. Yeah, no need to worry at all. But there are some advanced APIs, like the APIs just I have shown you. For example, Meta's API or X API, or what you can say, Google API, all this advanced APIs, OpenAI API as well, like ChatGPT API. If you want to build your own ChatGPT but you don't have enough data, then you can use the Gemini version API, or you can use Meta's API to integrate those systems, those GPT models in your app. So if you want to do that, then they might require you some tokens, right? Tokens are nothing but authorization. They want to check you whether you are a real person or not, whether you are bot or not. Like, they want to check you, they want to check your real identity. They need one thing. And also sometimes some APIs are paid. You need to pay it, you need to give your credit card details, all these different things. But here we are not gonna do this. We are not gonna pay anything to the advanced APIs. We will use normal APIs. And one more thing I want to tell you in this session is, the thing we are going to do in this session is, we are going to talk about how we can use APIs, how we can send our request to our APIs. We are going to talk about the usage of API, but we are not going to talk about how we can create API. In the next upcoming sessions, when we study backend, when we studied about servers in detail, in that we will see how we can build our own APIs, how we can create our APIs. Okay, so I hope we are clear. Now there are some free random interesting APIs which we can use right now. So the first one is catninja.fact, is a one type API, and what this API will do is that it will give you some random facts about cat. Right now, the next we are gonna see is board API. So what this will do is that it will tell you to do some work. If you are villa person, I know you are a villa person, you're watching this video, all these things, but yeah, if you are bored and if you want to do some work, then you can use this API. And the next type of API is dog pictures API. So what this API will do is that it will give you some interesting images of dog. Okay, we will see how this API will look like. So I will go back, and the first API we are gonna use is cat ninja, right? So I will go to catninja.fact, and what this API will do is that it will return me the JSON format. I have told you that whenever we call a API, it will return data in the form of JSON, and this is JSON. You can see we are getting fact, key, and its corresponding value. So this, whatever the form we are getting now, this form, what we call it as a JSON format, and I will talk about JSON in detail in few minutes. Okay, so here you can see I'm having fact and I'm getting some random fact about this cat. Cat don't think they are little people, they think we are big cats. They influence their behavior in many ways, and you can refresh the document and you can see we'll get the new fact. The cheetah is a world largest animal and something like this. Okay, and again refresh, we'll get some random fact. Again refresh, the cats, whatever, collarbone something, cat should not feed tuna exclusively. Tuna is a kind of fish, but yeah, this the different facts we'll get using this API, and this is an interesting one. We can use it whenever we want. And the next type of API we are having is which one? Board API. So www dot here www dot board API slash activity. Now what this API will do is that it will give you some random facts about this. Here we will use this fact, and you will, and this API will give you some random facts. Here search it and you can see it is showing activity meditate for 5 minutes. Now you can refresh it and it will give you some new activity. Give your pet 10 minutes focused attention. Refresh this thing and let me zoom it. Okay, refresh this thing. Prepare a dish from a foreign, I don't know, from a foreign culture, whatever. Like this API will give you some random task. Now the next is dog API. So dog API something, and you can see we will have dog API, and this API will generate random images. Here I will copy this link and I will come here. Now you can see it is giving me the link. I have told you that every API will return the data in the form of a image. Now if I copy this image, now let me copy this image and I will paste it in my browser. So when I paste it in my browser, I will get the image of this cute dog. I don't know whether it is cute or not because I don't like dogs, but yeah, I can refresh it here. I will get some new dog image. I will copy this dog image and I can paste it in my browser. So I will paste it here. Okay, now you can see I got a cute dog image with a cat. Like this we will get different images, but the returned format of an API is almost every time is in JSON format. I hope you have understood how we use APIs. APIs are nothing but URL, and this URL has an endpoint, and based on this endpoint it will return me the data in the form of JSON. Okay, we have talked about JSON a lot. Let us discuss what is JSON. So JSON, the full form of JSON is JavaScript Object Notation. Okay, now let me tell you what is happening. Whenever I am calling a API, I am getting something in return, and that thing is having some key and its corresponding value. So I am telling this that this key and value is JSON. What is this? So here let's say I am calling API, and this API is returning me some data, and this data is in the form of JSON, and JSON is nothing but you can say similar to JavaScript object, but it is not entirely JavaScript object at the same time. What I mean by entirely JavaScript object is, here we have studied object literals, I think in JavaScript part 6 or part 5, I don't know exactly, but we have talked about object literal. Object literal is nothing but hash map. Hash map will have key and value pair. Okay, similarly in JSON also we will have key and its corresponding value. Okay, I have written the value, but yeah, key and value, we will have key value pair, and this JSON will give me the entire information of that particular called API. If I call dog API, then what I will get? I will get the entire information about that dog. If I am calling cat fact, then I will get the entire information of cat fact in the form of key value pair. I hope you are getting it here. Okay, so here like this we'll get APIs in the form of JSON. Now we will ask one more question. Okay, Jabir, we have understood JSON is nothing but return data in the form of key value pair, and object literal is also key value pair. So what is the difference between JSON and normal object? Normal object, what is the difference between these two? The difference between these two is, here the key is always a string, right? The key is always a string, but here we don't have to be. It doesn't have to be all the time. The key can be a string, the key can be a number, the key can be a variable, it can be anything in normal object. But when it comes to JSON, it has to be a string all the time. Okay, this is one of the key differences. And the next difference is, here undefined is not there, but here we will have undefined values. For example, let's say I am creating a JavaScript object, and here I am giving some a, and for a I am assigning its values as undefined. I can do this in my JavaScript normal object, but in JSON I cannot do this thing. It is not possible to write something like undefined because we don't have undefined, right? I hope I understood. These are the two main differences in JSON and normal JavaScript object. And one more thing is, JSON is not built for humans, right? Here we are getting data, in simple terms. You can see we are understanding, okay, I'm getting message as this, and I'm getting status something like this. Here also I'm getting API. Where is my API? Yeah, this is activity API. I'm having key and its corresponding value, key corresponding value, all these things. Okay, got it, understood. But what I'm telling is, JSON is not built for humans. It is built for computers. Whenever you call a real-time application now, you will get a huge JSON file, a file which can have 10,000 lines. Just imagine a JSON object which is having 10,000 lines, and it is representing the entire data of your API. Is it possible to even read that? Not, right? No, right? So here, this is the thing, right? So the thing you need to remember, in JSON the key is always in the form of string, and the value, we don't have a value called as undefined. Okay, got it. These are the two different things between, these are the two key differences between JSON and normal JavaScript object. Okay, understood, Jabir? And one more thing is, it is not built for humans. It is not built for humans. It is built for computers to understand, okay, this is what the API is doing. Understood, understood. Now if you want to study in detail, then there is a website called as JSON.org. JSON.org. In JSON.org you can study, these are the objects which can be possible for a particular JSON. We can have array, we can have object, we can have a string, we can have true, false, all these different things. And you can observe here is, we are not having something called as undefined null, because undefined or null is not defined in our JSON. Okay, understood. And there is also a platform called as JSON Validator, and using JSON Validator you can check whether a particular JSON format is correct or not. Okay, so here for example, let's say this is my API, right? So I will copy this API, I will copy the JSON data and I will paste it here. And I will click on validate. Remove this Google Ads, I don't want to see Google Ads, and you can see I'm getting the output as JSON is valid. Now if I remove here, if I remove string, I know that here in this code, the key, if it is a JSON file, the key has to be a string all the time. But here the key is not in the form of a string. Now let us see what will happen. I will run this, and you can see JSON is invalid and expecting string as a key. Here it is expecting a string, but we are giving entirely something. That is why it is giving an error. Like this you can check whether your API is valid or not. I hope you have understood what is JSON and how APIs will work. Now there is a important thing which you need to know, which is XML versus JSON. So XML, in previous days, I think 5-7 years ago, we used to have XML files. We used to have XML files, and whatever the data, where is my pen? I can't able to see my pen. Okay, whatever the data which we are returning whenever we call API, that data used to come in the form of a XML file. Okay, but nowadays we are having JSON object, and JSON object will look something like this. We'll have string and its corresponding value, and you can see all the keys are strings, and the values can be anything. The values can be a string, boolean value, numerical value, like this we are having. And one more thing is, XML is a old version. In previous days we used to use this thing, but nowadays around 90% of APIs will give you the data in the form of JSON. Okay, that is why you need to know this. If you are using some old APIs and if you are getting some random XML values, then you will blame me. You will tell, okay, Javin is like told that we'll get JSON data whenever we call API, but we are getting XML values. So this is totally wrong, right? But yeah, some APIs, some old APIs which haven't updated, they might give you the data in the form of XML document, and XML document is very similar to HTML, right? But here we'll have customized tags. Like for example, whenever we are having, you can say hire date, we can create our own tag. Like this, we can have our own tag. But when compared to XML, JSON is, I think, look good, and it is easy to understand. We'll have key value page, and in simple terms we can understand each and everything. Okay, got it. Now let us move to next slide. Okay, so in next slide we are gonna talk about some functions about JSON. We have understood what is JSON, right? But how we gonna talk, how we gonna like implement, or you can say take JSON in our JavaScript document. So to do that we have two methods. The first method is JSON.parse. Here the thing you need to remember is, I'm having, let's say JSON is returning me something A and its corresponding data, and B and its corresponding data. All these things it is returning me. Now this return data format will always be in the form of string. So here the JSON will always be a string. Now if you want to remove this string, and if you want to convert a JSON document into a normal document, normal object, then you will use parse function, and parse function will convert JSON into normal object literal. Now if you want to convert a normal object into a JSON, then you will use Stringfy function. Okay, I hope you have understood how we use this. Now let me come back here. I will go to my document, and in my document, where is my document? Here in my VS Code, I will come here, and in this I will create a variable, let response is equals to, and here whatever the data, for example my API is returning me this thing, right? Some Mexican cat, whatever. So I will copy this thing. So here I will remove this and I will give it here. Now you can see that this is a normal object. Right here I'm having message and its corresponding value. So this is a normal object that we are having. Now if I want to convert this object into a JSON format, then I can write JSON dot stringify, and here I will give my response. So I will give my response. Now what I can do is that along with it I can print it. So here I will write console dot log, and I will print this thing in my console. So let me save this and I will run this document. Okay, I'm running this document. I will inspect this thing, and you can see that in the console, where is my console? In the console I'm getting the message. I'm getting the message, and the message is in the form of a string, right? Let me refresh this thing, and you can see I'm getting the image, and everything is in the form of, you can say, string. Now here I can also parse it. Like I can also apply parse function. So here I will parse parse, save it. Now to parse this document, so what parse will do is that it will convert my JSON into a normal object. You can see that here, let response, I'm storing this as a normal object. Now if I want to convert into JSON, then I have to use you can say this symbol, right? Using this slash, or you can say quotation, I can convert my object, normal object, into JSON format. Now you can see this is a JavaScript object notation. This is my JSON. Now if I want to convert this JSON into normal JavaScript object, then I will use parse function. Now let me save and go to the document, refresh the document, and you can see I'm having some error after JSON position line in column 4. What is this? Here I need to remove this. I need to remove this thing. Okay, remove. Now save the document and go to here. You can see in the console I am getting the data in the form of object. Like this is a JavaScript object. You need to understand here is this is a JavaScript object. Now if I remove this quotation now, then this JSON will become a normal object. Now I can't use parse here because parse is used to convert JSON into object, not object into JSON. If I want to convert object into JSON, then I need to give here dot stringify. Now let me save and go to the console. You can see this is different. This is not a JavaScript object. This is a JSON file, or you can say JSON data format. Let me save, and I hope you have understood what is the difference between stringify and parse, and how we convert a normal JavaScript object into JSON format and JSON into object. Now the next concept and interesting concept we are having is testing APIs. We have understood what is a API. API is nothing but a URL which we use to show something or to get data from a particular thing. Okay, now how we can check whether this particular API is giving me correct response or not, whether it is working or not, and what is the health of that API. To check these things, we use some API testing applications, or you can say API testing tools, and these tools are, first one is Hopscotch and the next one is Postman. These are the most frequently used tools to check the health and overall conditions of an API. Okay, understood. Okay, we have understood. To check the health, or you can say how the API is working, we use these two tools. Now in this session we are gonna use the tool of Hopscotch because it is easy to understand and it doesn't require any sign up or account creation process. You can also use Postman. Postman is used by many developers, but it requires you to create an account. For basic operations, it requires you to create an account, but Hopscotch for basic operation like checking, or you can say health of an API, to do all these operations, it doesn't require to do, or you can say create an account. That is why we are gonna use Hopscotch, but at the same time you can also use Postman also. So let us see how Hopscotch will work. So here I will search hopscotch.io and I will come to the website of Hopscotch. Now I will remove all these things, and I have my cat API, right? So I will remove all these APIs, and this is my cat API. I will copy this thing and I will paste it here. I will zoom this thing and you can see I will paste it here, and I will, before send, you can see I'm having different things like get, post, put, patch, different. These are the different HTTP functions. For example, let's say I want to get some data from that particular API, then I will use get function. If I want to put some data as a user into that particular API, then I will use put, or you can say post function. And at the same time, if I want to delete something, then I will use delete function. So like this we have different functions. Right now we will use get function and I will click send. So what Hopscotch will do is that it will send a request to this particular API, and whatever the data it is returning, it will print that data here. Now this is the data I'm having. A female cat is called a queen or a Molly. Okay, and the length of this is 42, something like that. Now you can see the condition of this API is 200, which means it is working, and the time it is taking is 1169 milliseconds, and the size it has taken is 65 bit, right? Like this, we can check the condition, and also you can check what is the body of this API, what are the headers, what is like, does it require any authorization, pre-request, testing, all this different kind of things. Like this, we can also like send here, again send an API, and they will give you some like again Florence Nightingale owned more than 60 cats in her lifespan. Like this, we can use hopscotch to check what is the condition of an API. Let's say in the place of fact I'm giving some 2-3 values. Now we know that this API doesn't exist. So if I check how this API is performing, you can see that I will get the output as API not found, and it has taken some time, and the size of this request is 34 byte. Okay, got it. And the message it is telling me is that API is not found and the code is 404. We have different codes to represent the condition of an API. We will talk about different codes in few minutes. Like this, we will use the hopscotch code. Now the next concept you are having is AJAX. AJAX, the full form of AJAX is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. What is the meaning of this is it represents JavaScript asynchronous nature. In previous session, we have talked about what are promises, what are async and await function, and we have talked about those things to tell you that JavaScript is a single threaded language. It follows a flow of things, and it can't do multiple things at a time. But to make our JavaScript to do multiple things at a time, we use asynchronous nature. We use asynchronous functions called as async and wait, promises, like this we use, right? So here in AJAX, it tells you the nature of JavaScript. It tells you the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. What is the meaning of this is, let's say I'm having 10 lines in my code, line 1, line 2, line 3, like this, and in the line 2 I'm calling my API, and this API is taking 2 hours of time, but you don't want your code to stop in the line 2, because for example, imagine this as an Instagram platform. Okay, now in Instagram you are uploading something, you are uploading a huge file. Okay, so when you upload a huge file, what is happening there is, uh, it will take some time, but whenever that thing is taking time, you don't want other things to stop. For example, you want to see reels, you want to talk with your friends, you want to talk with your, you can say, other half, your teacher, your like colleagues, all these people, you want to talk to them and see reels at the same time, and at the same time you want to upload something, you want to do all these operations at the same time. So when you upload something, now it is taking time, the API of uploading process is taking time, but you don't want to you can freeze entire browser. You don't want your browser to get freeze. You want to see reels, all these operations you want to do at the same time, so you can do that using AJAX. Okay, so what AJAX will do is that it will take API and it will do its own work, but at the same time your code execution will continue, and whenever the API process will get completed, it will come back and it will return that thing to your JavaScript. This is the meaning of AJAX. In previous time we used to use XML, that is why we have named it as AJAX. Right now we are using JavaScript object, right, JSON. So here you can call it as AJAX, but AJAX is not that much sounds good. That is why we have kept it as AJAX. I hope you have understood. So AJAX represent the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. Whenever API is taking time, your code will not get stopped. Your code execution will continue and the API process will continue. And whenever the API process is completed, it will come back and it will return you the thing which is there. Okay, understood. So the next concept is HTTP verbs. HTTP verbs are very simple and we will talk about them in backend. Like whenever we talk about in detail Node.js, in Node.js we'll talk about what is get, post, delete, all these things. But in brief, I will tell you, whenever we are sending request to an API, we have different types of request like get request, post request, delete request, all these things. Okay, now post request is something, let's say whenever I call my API, I want to send some data along with it. I can do it using my post request. If I want to delete some data in my server using this API, then in the HTTP request I will send delete, and if I only want to get some data, then I can use get method. Like this we have different methods, and we will discuss these different methods once we complete version control. Now the next is status code. Status codes tell you the health of an API, whether the API is working or not, and we have different types of health codes, but the most frequently used ones are this. The first one is 200. 200 will tell you whether that API is healthy or not, whether that API is working or not. The next is 404. If the API is not found, then we'll get 404. And if the internet is not working, then we'll get 400 as a status code. Now, if your API server is not working, then we will get 500 as the status code. Okay. Now, the next concept is adding information to your URL. For example, let me show you what is the meaning of adding request. I will go to Google. Although Google is not an API, it's a huge database. So I will go to google.com, and in google.com I will search something. For example, I'm searching right now. You can see I'm having google.co.in. This is a India's URL. Okay, now let's say I'm searching about these are my recent searches, but I can search about Batman, or let us go with some other superhero. How about anime? I will search anime, and you can see when I search anime now, just observe this URL. Just observe this URL, and you can see google.com.in slash search slash some request and anime and CSS something, and I'm getting the request of anime like netflix.com about anime, all these different things. So this query which I'm sending along with the request, this thing is known as sending query along with our API. Now we have different queries. For example, let's say that I want to search a particular book of Harry Potter. So we'll have a API of Harry Potter. Here I will search Harry Potter API, Harry Potter API, and this is the, I think, Harry Potter's API. This is the one version, and you can see slash API slash characters. This is a query in itself, and it will give you the entire information about the characters, how many characters are there in the Harry Potter universe, and you can see specific character information. Like if I go in this, it will tell me the specific character information, like Harry Potter. Here we'll have gender male, house, and all this. The specific character is Harry Potter. Now if I refresh this thing, I will get some other character here, Harry Potter, and like his powers, what is his stage, Hogwarts student or not, like this I will get the information about this API. Now if I want to know the entire character information, so this is the API. As I told you that JSON is not a readable format for human. You can't read this data. This data is read by computers. Okay, so here I will make this pretty print such that I can understand. Here you can see name is Harry Potter, and about him, after the name is Hermione, and about her, like she's a female, she's a good, you can say, magician, because I haven't watched Harry Potter even once, and eye color, like this will get the information about a specific thing. Okay, and this you can see I'm having slash search slash house slash this. These are queries in itself, these are routes in itself, which will give you a particular endpoint, and we call this endpoint as a route, or you can say a search query. Now the next and final concept is we are gonna use the function fetch, and using fetch we are gonna build our own API. Not we are gonna build, but we are gonna use API. Okay, so here I will go back to my VS Code and I will remove all this. Okay, so here what I'm gonna do is that I will create a variable, let's say URL, because API is a URL. Now what we will do is that we will take a URL of an API. For example, I want to take cat API, so I will copy the cat API link and I will paste it here. Okay, after pasting this, I will using fetch function. Fetch is used to get the API, get that particular API in our document. So here I will use fetch function, and in the parenthesis I will give my URL. Okay, now what this fetch will do is that if I print fetch, it will return me a promise. We already know what is a promise. Promise is something which will tell me whether an operation is completed or not. So I will go to the document and you can see the promise is pending because I haven't called the promise, right? So here what I can do is that we know that promise has two main functions, then and catch. Then is used if the promise is fulfilled, then we will use then function in promise. If the function is not fulfilled, if the promise is not fulfilled, then we will use catch function. So here I will remove this and I will use then, and in then if there is a response from the API, then what I will do is that I will create a arrow function and I will print the response. Whatever the response I got, I will print that. Okay, so I will print it. Now after this I will return the JSON format of that particular response. So I will return the JSON also. Okay, now if there is no response from my console, from my API, then I will use then function. Then I will use catch, and if there is an error, then I will write console.log, I will write error, and I will also print the error. The error is error. Okay, like this I will do, and here I can also add another then function to print the data. So if the response is sending me some data, then I can also print the data. So console.log, and I will print the data. Let me save and go to the document. You can see I'm getting a random fact. This is my response. The response is it is returning me the entire structure of API. This first line, this thing is returning me the entire JSON structure. This is the JSON structure that we are having. Okay, now if I want to print what is the data returned by this API, this is the data. A cat has 2 vocal cords and can make 100 sounds. This is the data which I am printing. So to print the body of my JSON, we use this thing. To print the entire data, we use this thing. Like this, we can build, or you can say we can write our very own response using APIs. I hope you have understood what are APIs, how we use APIs, and why we use APIs. Okay, so I want you guys to build your own API by the end of this session, and you can comment it out. Okay, I have built this API, and you can paste your GitHub link also. With that being said, this is the lecture about APIs. I hope you have understood. I tried my best to give you one of the simplest explanation about API. In the next lecture, we will make our API concept complex, and we will try to do advanced things when we go into backend. With that being said, I will see you